You've tuned into the Bellingham podcast for the week of May 10th, 2021. This is episode 189. From that bright and sunny city by the Salish Sea, I am AJ Barce. On this episode, Chris is still off the mic and he'll be back with us soon. Trust me, I do know where he is and he does still exist. However, I do have another special guest for this episode. This is going to be another back-to-back episode. So, for the next 2 weeks, you have myself and our special guest. You want to know more? I'll give you a hint. Get your motor running on this episode of the Bellingham podcast. And now you're probably thinking, gosh, we haven't heard Chris on the mic for a while. Now, I have on good authority, he is back behind enemy lines. He's, working his clandestine angles, but I have proof of life, folks. Chris Powell is going to be on the show. I kid you not this episode, but the next. So for those of you that are clamoring for big bad Chris Powell, don't worry, he's going to come back. But for this episode, I've got another special guest because I'm half of the show and he's gone. So, while Chris is out playing, this mice is going to just keep podcasting. So this week, we have another Dan. I know, I have a lot of Dans. Apparently, they're all in the military in different countries. But this one is here in this country. You actually heard his voice before. He's recorded a few bits on the show once or twice, and we've given a lot of shout outs. Your friend and mine, Dan Kohlbeck. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good. So obviously for full disclosures, because that's what this show does, Danny boy, you and I go way back.
Way back.
Decades.
Absolutely.
Decades.
Yeah, I'm feeling my age now.
Seriously, dude. I was thinking about it before kicking the show off, and I was just like, man, I've known you for years. No, I can't say that, bro. Like literally, no. I've known you for decades. Okay. Yep. So that's pretty skookum if you ask me. But because I know you so well, but everybody else here in podcast land, they are not, they're like, this Dan who? He doesn't have a Welsh accent. So clearly he's American. All right. Who are you? What do you do for a living? And what do you do for fun?
Well, I definitely appreciate that intro. Like I said, I am now feeling much older than I was about 5 minutes ago. So like I said, we go back to the Pacific Northwest years and years back. About 2006, got commissioned, joined the Navy, been in now for close to 15 years. Sadly, once I left, I have not actually been able to get back. Though I will say the old slogan of join the Navy, see the world is absolutely true. I've seen quite a bit of the world. It's mostly ocean. But at present, actually out in Rhode Island, where I'll be here for a couple more months before heading back down to the Southwest. So we'll at least be in the same time zone again, which will be nice. So I do have to say, of course, views and opinions are my own since I am active. They are mine. They're not that of the government. But given what we'll be talking about, I'll give a little hint here. So not just with the Navy, but one of the hobbies that I've had at one point was a MSF-certified rider coach. So I was actually certified to teach people, brand new beginners like I once was myself, how to ride motorcycles. And generally enjoy doing that on my off time.
And MSF stands for those that aren't in the two-wheel clique?
Motorcycle Safety Foundation.
Yeah, man. So if anybody is listening to the show, there's like, okay, what the angle is AJ going to do with this, Dan? Is it going to be watches? What is it? Nope. We are talking about the two-wheeled Zen, known as motorcycling. So this episode is going to be talking about some of the kit that Dan and I have, some of our rides that we would encourage anybody to check out, whether you're on this side of the left side of the coast or the right side of the coast of the United States, as well as some other places worldwide, because Dan's so bad, he is worldwide. Of course, like any other two motorcycle enthusiasts, we're just going to shoot the breeze. I do have to remind you that we are, much like the views expressed are that of yours and not of the United States Navy, which, P.S. and by the way, thank you for your service, as Chris and I always say on the show. We're going to be keeping this clean and motorcycle fresh for family. So hopefully this podcast is more of an inspirational piece, not like, and we're going to kind of debunk a little bit of the motorcycle culture, right? Like, you're like, I'm looking on you on Zoom, man. You're tatted up. You got like this big burly beard, right? Because, that's what motorcyclists, that's what we look like, right?
Sure. Yes. In every movie and TV show, that's totally how it works.
Yeah. Dan and I are regular Sons of Anarchy, right? No, yeah. So So let's diving in. Let's kind of debunk like what our current rides are. Danny, go first. What's your current two-wheel ride that you have?
So I am recently in possession of an upgrade. So I am now on a 2020 Harley Davidson Heritage Classic with the 114 engine, which is just an absolute blast to ride. Specifically the Tahitian teal. So one of the more rare colors out there, but I was pretty firm on that one. And so if you see it, chances are it's probably me riding around. I don't think I've seen another one with the same color scheme. But that bike has been an absolute blast. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about where it's been and whatnot. So, but that said, I'm big on the upgrading to reflect the current style of riding. But AJ, I know that you're riding something that you've been riding for a hot minute now.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, I have my TU250X by Suzuki back from 2009. I'm convinced I'm gonna have this ride and until the state of Washington declares it vintage, which is good because that'll just make my rides in the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride that much easier. Which I know it's not on our show notes, but I forgot to add this in, is that this year's Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, which I thought plugs in well with our topic today, the DGR turns 10 this year. This is their 10th. Yeah. So they're going to be doing a little bit something different. So last year, as many on the show know, every year the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, they support, it's a global effort of motorcyclists with vintage motorcycles. And again, debunking this notion of motorcycle culture of like bad boys and girls. Yeah. No, this is a gentleman's ride. You get dappered up. Men and women get, decked to the nines in tweed and, just looking clean cut, classic Don Draper style motorcycling. And all the funds support the Movember Foundation for prostate cancer awareness and men's mental health. This year, like last year, it was a ride solo together. That's what they called it because again, with COVID worldwide, they didn't want to do their ride and, have a gathering of motorcyclists from around the world. I usually ride in the YVR, the Vancouver branch. Shout out to my mates across the border. Someday maybe it'll open up again and I can see y'all. Just
going to say a little bit hard this last year to get up there.
It was impossible. Non-essential travel across our border is still in effect. So like I have not seen my mates across the border in over a year, but this year, so last year it was you ride solo. So I rode around Bellingham. I mapped it out and a small amount of donations because again, last year was pretty tough for folks. So this year they're doing something a little bit different. If you're in a country, location, city, etc., that supports rallying up, you can go do so, or you can ride solo. Because again, it's more about bringing awareness, looking the part, and of course raising the funds to the Movember Foundation. So I'll put a link in the show notes to the DGR. So for the love of all things unmufflered, drink. If you want to support me or any of my brothers and sisters in the DGR. So a little shameless plug. But anyway, the TU250X, which is where we came in at, is a 250 motorcycle. It's a single cylinder made by Suzuki. And I have the rare 2009 only color of red, which if you see that around in the Pacific Northwest, there's a few of them. I've ran into a few other guys that have had it. But mine is very much classiced out. I've got a rack on the back and it's pretty well stocked short of the mirrors. I put some bar end mirrors because I can't stand the short little stubbies, that they had up on top. And it's such a small bike. I don't want the full framed mirrors like you see on the Triumph, on the Bonnevilles and stuff. But no, that is my commuter. As a matter of fact, this time of season, I've been riding it since 2009. I'm the one and only owner of it. It's by far the greatest bike for people to start on, but also just to continue with. Because like if you're a commuter like me, I smoke any hybrid off the line. Okay, Tesla, I'm looking at you. You're about the only one that can smoke me off the line because I get like a whopping 90 miles to the gallon. Yes, you heard that right, folks. 90 miles a gallon on a 3.5 gallon tank, folks. My fill up at the pump, regardless of what it is like $6 and I'm full.
When I will say that is the nice thing with the mile. Now, granted, I don't get quite that good. I get between 40 and 45. So I challenge you
Feel good.
to a taking off the line there with my 114. But by golly, with the gas prices down in Southern California, it was nice to fill up the bike instead of the car. That's for sure.
Yep. So in traditional motorcycle joshing, as I usually tell, because there was one time I was with a ride, and there's a local guy here who has one of the last of the 999 Ducatis. When Ducati decommissioned that engine, apparently they did a special run of the tricolore, so the green, white, and red of Italy, and he had the naked bike version. You can see the open clutch cover. You can see the whole thing. Like, it's just a moving piece of motorcycle magic. But off the line, I did beat him, and he goes, well, I mean, if we stretch this out, I'm going to smoke you. I go, absolutely. You have, 750 cc's over my displacement, right? But here's the thing. You can pass me, but you cannot pass a gas station. And I said that in front of a bunch of motorcycle guys, and everybody's like, oh! So to you, Danny, you can pass me, but you can't pass a gas station.
Yeah, what do you think about that one? I will say my previous bike, I had a 2015 Harley Street 750. It was one of those I had stepped away from riding when I came back from Japan the first time, and was getting back into it, and it was a good price point for me. Same size engine, that 3.5 gallon tank. And that got challenging at times for some of these longer rides. My current bike's got a 5.5 gallon tank, and I can put some miles on. I can absolutely. Sure.
So getting into motorcycling, so Danny and I, joshing aside, there's a couple of things, like, even if you don't know much, like, honestly, if you're, especially here in Bellingham, like, if you're a bicyclist, like, motorcycling is literally a bicycle just on a bigger frame and a motor so that you don't have to pedal. And there's a couple of things to look at. Like, not all bikes fit the rider and the lifestyle. So, like, for instance, both of our bikes are street bikes. If you're going to do some more type of not off-roading, I'm using that loosely, but, like, if you're going up to more of our ruggedish trails that we have here, you might look at something more like an enduro, something that's got little knobbier tiles. Think of it as a street legal dirt bike. Is the best way I can call that. Meanwhile, like, if you're doing long hauls, like Danny was saying, like, you might want to have something more in the touring or sport touring mode, where you have a little bit bigger frame, bigger displacement engine. Whereas mine's more of a commuter. I've got 250 cc's, which gets me from here to when I used to go to the office to work and back. But you can go on long rides. I mean, I've ridden, and we'll talk about some of the rides I've been on this 250, which dumbfounds a lot of people. You can go. It's more about, motorcycling is a different way of transportation. It is. I say that culturally. That's why I opened up the show this way, is motorcycle culture. It's not about how fast you get there. Some people do. My brothers and sisters that do the Monkey Butt, which is used to be a local ride that goes from Skagit all the way to Leavenworth, enjoying the road, enjoying the ride that you have, because most guys and gals that are on two wheels pretty much know what's underneath them, because that's kind of, you have to, like, your life and your skin relies on what is underneath you, and knowing how it's supposed to feel, how it's supposed to perform, and how the road is. So just keep that all in the back of the mind when you hear Danny and I talk about kit. Motorcycle kit, especially when you talk about the bike itself, is much in a different vein. It's not like
it's a deeply personal thing, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, I just got my bike back, had a bunch of custom parts put on to include some new bars. A world of difference that it makes. Now, granted, you see, you hear the term ape hangers, and you hear that term, you think arms up, way above your head.
Born to be wild.
Yeah. Easy rider, rolling out in Route 66 and all that. No, but even those, by their definitions, just bars that come up. So going, in my case, the stock 12-inch to a 14-inch rise makes all the difference in an ergonomic perspective for riding. And but you'll see folks that no matter what they have, not only the style of bike, but the modifications that they, like your mirrors, that is your style, that is your type, because that fits what you want to do. And everybody's going to be a little bit different. That's part of the fun of it.
And that's the thing that's nice about this, is, like, it's highly customizable, or you can keep it as stock as possible. Like, I know a lot of guys that take my bike and cafe racer out. And so, you're taking the handlebars, raking it forward a little bit, so you have more of that sport feel. However, like, that type of riding, like, sporty looking bikes, and they're hunched over the tank and stuff. And quite frankly, you and I both have ridden sport bikes, and riding like that short distances, not so bad. But riding from here to substantial distances, not that fun.
It really depends. I will say I had, and I'll talk about some other bikes later on here. I was pleasantly surprised. I had a 2008 Speed Triple, Triumph Speed Triple, that despite its design, I took it across Japan from Yokosuka across to Matsumoto. So I went over the Japanese Alps over the course of a weekend, about 350 miles. And I was surprised at how comfortable it was long term. However, that is not always the case.
Right. Your mileage will vary. See Absolutely. Your lower back for details. Speaking of details and bars, you might have a radio mounted up on those bars, and you might be listening to us on Camry 102.3 FM, community powered and community streaming here in Bellingham at camry.org. So talking about customization and picking the best bike for the person and such. Now let's just face it. Okay. Like you and I, we love our bikes dearly. However, if there was the ability to be able to get what Chris and I always say, buy the best, cry once. I know that doesn't really fit within motorcycling, but like, let's just do it this way. What is the bike that if you could just sell yours and what is the bike that you're lusting after? What would it be, Danny?
Ooh. So for me, in my ride, I am a huge fan of the Harley-Davidson CVO line, which is their custom vehicle operations. Yeah. And in particular, one of my goals is post-retirement, getting out more on the road, is to ride Route 66, beginning to end. And I tell you, my bike is great in the city and it's great for longer rides, but it's a soft tail. It's got a single shock. So if I were to jump onto anything, it would be the Harley-Davidson Limited CVO. One for the storage, two for the comfort. You wouldn't think this if you're not used to riding, but having the ability to block the wind hitting you square in the chest in your legs or wherever makes a world of difference with your ability to put those miles in. And in particular, doing things like joining the Iron Butt Association, riding that 1,000 miles in 24 hours. So, but yeah, that absolutely first choice would be that limited CVO. Now, I know I put this in the show notes, but I'm going to deviate a little bit with you.
Sure.
So as I mentioned, former rider coach, and I actually learned to ride in Japan. And the reason I say this is the military in Japan, if you don't have a stateside endorsement, at least for the Navy side, you are limited your first year of riding to a 400cc bike. So my first bike was a 1994 Honda CB400, carbureted engine, great little starter bike. It bright yellow with a black windshield. I called it the
Bumblebee.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that bike.
And so the reason I say this is every rider, before you go out, and I know you've got your recommendation, and I just talked about the limited CVO. The limited's a big bike, displacement, big bike, heavy bike. If somebody's learning to start, I would not start with that bike. It is too much for them. Just like my Speed Triple, that was my second bike. I got a good deal from a friend of mine, but I could not have handled that 1080 cc engine fresh off the bat. And unfortunately, it's a big mistake I see a lot of young riders make because they jump on those bigger displacement bikes. So it's a long way to say this whole buy once, cry once is great for most things, but definitely buy within the limits of what you know how to do. So if you're going to start out, I would honestly look at a little standard. Yours, the TU250 is a great one to start with. For me, I would go a little bit bigger, something like the Honda CB500.
Totally.
Yeah, nicer look, smaller engine, but easy to handle, fairly light bike. You want to step up from that and you want to do something that's less touring and long distance riding, and you want to go hit the streets in the city, go to the canyons, go through the twisties. I got to throw another shout out to that Speed Triple. Their latest with the 1200 engine is a gorgeous, gorgeous bike with the distinctive bug eye headlamps. I mean, it's if I could get my hands on one and go for a ride, I don't think you'd see me for a couple hours.
Yeah, no, I have to admit, no, the Speed Triple Triumph, and if you're unfamiliar with motorcycles, again, we have all the links in the show notes, but the Triumph Speed Triple, and I believe that 1200 is a new engine for that bike too.
Yes.
I mean, like, you look at it and it looks like a Transformer. I'm not going to lie. Like, if there was ever a bike to turn into a Transformer movie, it would be the Triumph Speed Triple.
Well, you did talk a little bit about it with with Ducati, but I mean, their Speed Triple line is their Street Fighter line.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a souped up cafe racer, if you will. So,
yep.
And again, those are comfortable bikes. The ergonomics just work. But yeah, those are a couple of options. And so I've talked enough about this limited CVO. In my case, the Royal Purple and Royal Black Fade, which is absolutely gorgeous. But how about yourself? What would you be riding there, bro?
So I've eyed this. I've even had my leg over it a few times. I love, with a capital L, the re-release of the Ducati Scrambler that they did a couple years back. There was, and I don't think they keep this edition anymore, but there was the Ducati Scrambler X, which was a Pacific Northwest edition of the Ducati. It was in like this Pacific Northwest meets olive drab-ish green. And what's great about a Scrambler, if you don't know what this is, it's a mishmash of just a standard riding position bike, but usually it has like elevated pipes, so you get a little bit more clearance. Sometimes they have knobby tires if you're going to be, again, going from gravel to pavement and stuff. And this one also had a rock grill in front of the light because you don't want to catch a rock into your lens of your light. And it was just better kitted up. The feeling of it was just skookum, man. Like, for me, riding in the Pacific Northwest, if I wanted to go the next step, get a higher displacement engine this way, obviously. But again, it would be able to give me a little bit more ability to go both, and I'm not going to say off-road, but just a little bit better equipped when I have to hit gravel, if you know what I mean. Okay. But it also sings on pavement. So that's what I would do is that Ducati Scrambler. Even the standard one is great, dude. Like, just a great, it's just a great overall bike. A lot of people think like, ooh, Ducati, it's going to be a premium. It's in the same price range as like a Bonneville or any other 800cc ish. No, it's just an overall cool bike. I don't know if I'll ever get one, but it is something I do lust after.
Oh, I don't blame you. I mean, it sounds kind of inspired by the old World War II Army bikes.
No, seriously. Like if you ever saw like, what was that? Steve McQueen and The Great Escape. The Great Escape where he had like that was actually a Bonneville that they did in the filming of that, but like same style. But this one's a newer version. Like, it doesn't have that retro look per se. It's a very new Scramble because if you look at Triumph's actual Scrambler, they still have that old vintage look. This is a new modern take on that same style, which is just killer. No, and that's another thing. So as we're casually talking about motorcycles, and if you're listening, it's going, man, this is kind of cool and stuff. I want to dive into it. So a couple of things to keep in mind is the displacement and like, how much range anxiety can be a thing on motorcycling, no differently than a Tesla. Price, obviously, but also weight. You and I kind of mentioned like these bikes can be heavy. Mine has a curb weight of about 350, 375 pounds wet on the curb. That CB500 is probably, I'm going to guess, probably about 100 pounds more than that.
A swag, I think, is probably about right. Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, your bike on the curb, Danny, how heavy is? Yeah, 800 pounds, folks. And one of the things that every motorcycle rider will tell you is when it comes to motorcycle riding, it's not a matter of if you dump your bike, it's a matter of when. Like you will, your bike. I've had my bike laid down. I mean, Danny, I believe you've had yours laid down before.
Thankfully, not this one. But yes, I've laid down multiple bikes, whether it's in the course or as a new rider learning. Word to the wise for those starting: if you're going to swerve. If you're going to brake. Do not try to swerve and brake. That's a bad idea, and you will starfish in the middle of an intersection. I totally don't know that from experience.
No, absolutely not. But the reason why I mention that is, when a bike goes down on you as a rider, people forget you have to be able to get it up off of you. When I laid mine on, my accident actually happened because I was on gravel. And again, street bikes, street tires on a gravel road, not a good combination. And you and I have been riding. How long have you been riding? You've been doing it longer than me.
right around the time my daughter was born, actually, because I'm totally good dad like that. Let's do a high risk activity.
Absolutely, I'm the same way.
Yeah. So 12 going on 13 years now.
Yeah, I think I've been riding for about 10. And, I laid my TU down. I was with my dad, actually. We were going to go on a ride and transitioning from gravel to asphalt, and it bit me. And here I am, and here's my bike. And like I said, 350 pounds, and a guy with my build, you can lift that. You can, because you pivot it up. It is a motorcycle. You have to lift the whole thing. But when you're under it, that's the part that people forget is you have 350 pounds on one leg, and you have to push this bike up. Yep. Bear that in mind when you're first riding is, something will happen. And if you're alone, because again, motorcycling is typically a solo thing, you got to be prepared to be able to think outside the box if that happens on you.
So I will say to that effect, it's really easy when you first get a bike, especially brand new bike, and you're excited to get out on the road.
Oh yeah. I
will say, take the time, invest the extra amount of money. You already dropped anywhere from $5,000 to $35,000 on this motorcycle. Spend the extra couple $100, get yourself a good engine guard and or saddlebag guards if you happen to be equipped with those. For two reasons. One, because they're a lot cheaper to replace than your paint job. Two, a lot cheaper to replace than your engine. And three, especially depending on the design, like the kind I have on my bike now, they will help give some clearance for me when the bike goes down. So if I do have it fall down on me and on my leg, I have a better chance of getting it out, especially with how far out that engine guard sticks out. So just, it can run anywhere from $200 to $500, depending on the make and model. But it is a worthwhile investment before setting out, especially as you're learning.
And I think it goes without saying, both of us, I mean, especially because you're a former MSF certified riding coach, ride, especially in the state of Washington, with a license. Do not ride with, and you and I both, I imagine, have met people who ride without the endorsement. And here in the state of Washington, at least last I checked, if you are caught, if you're pulled over, your bike is immediately impounded.
It makes for a long walk of shame going back home. That's for sure.
Yep. Yep. So just, motorcycling is fun. And, you and I both know within the culture, there's, guys and gals that decide, I've got it. I'm just going to diddy bop. No big deal. Whatever. Do not ride without a license. And also in the state of Washington, you do want to carry at least liability insurance. Because again, your motorcycle, if you hit somebody, you are liable to fix it.
Well, and you mentioned the license. I would say wherever you are, look closely at whatever the laws are with riding. For example, in a handful of states, lane filtering is completely legal. Where
lane filtering is
riding in between the lanes. So, for example, Southern California, when I was heading home, I would take I-5 south to the 54 interchange to the 805. Well, the 54 interchange would usually get pretty backed up, and it's 2 lanes of traffic. Well, being on the motorcycle, that didn't have to stop me because it's legal down now. There's some guidelines of how fast you can go over the local speed and things like that, which is all incredibly important from a safety standpoint. But other states, that's not legal. So it's something to take. For example, here in Rhode Island, I can't do that, at least not legally. So I don't. And it was an adjustment to go on the road and make sure that I wasn't making the same kind of taking the same kind of actions that I would take in other states. So it's a little more varied than you're used to when you have 4 wheels and a cage around you.
Again, do check out what your local lay of the land is. Lane filtering, also another phrase that you may have heard if you're not familiar with it. It's also lane splitting. You hear that also in some states as well. And Washington State, I don't believe we don't have that ability to lane split here.
It tends to be your hotter climates, mostly due to the argument being air-cooled engines. You need to keep air moving over them. So it makes sense down in southern latitudes.
So looking at that, though, the only other thing that I might throw out there that you and I also both endorse is the fact that, go through a course, go through go through a train. Personally, like I've even told this to a buddy of mine and friend of the show, Kevin, before they departed this country. Actually, he had a little one who is now going to be, a big shaver, and was about ready to drive 4 wheels. And I told him, like, before you have your son go behind the wheel, put him through motorcycle safety first. If you think you are a good driver, then I dare you, dear listener, spend the $350. It's a weekend course, and take a motorcycle training course, because then you will realize how bad of a driver you actually are.
One thing I will say to that on the courses. So from the MSF side, like I said, at one point I was certified. Unfortunately, due to deployments, I wasn't able to keep my currency. But I can tell you, as I mentioned, I learned to ride in Japan. The first time I straddled a motorcycle was day one of that course, of that 2-day course. And I learned from nothing. And then there's a follow-up course you take a little bit later on that kind of hones those skills. Not only do they teach you how to go from nothing up to where you can safely ride, but seeing some of the folks out there that you see YouTube videos all the time of it, I got to wonder if they actually have taken those courses and what they're learning.
Yeah.
Fundamentals. And it's something that even if you are removed from the course, so you're years removed, practice those fundamentals, your U-turns, your quick stops, all those things in a parking lot, in a cul-de-sac, wherever you can go, because they will save your life in an extremis situation.
I completely agree. And there's a lot of parking lots in your local town. If you ever notice in a parking lot these weird circles and ovals that are painted in parking lots, chances are that parking lot is actually used for MSF or for training. If you're like here in Bellingham, it's the parking lot, I believe, on the northwest side of Bellis Fair Mall. That is actually where I got trained as well. And my wife also rides, and she got hers. Again, she never, short of riding Queen behind me, never rode. And so she learned as well going that way. And my son, when he decides to want to drive 4 wheels, he's going to have to prove to dad that he can ride my motorcycle, and I can trust him with it. It's an interesting notion. Like if you're proficient on a bicycle and you become trained on a motorcycle, you will be a better 4-wheeled driver.
Well, you know what you're looking for, because there's this concept, right? And you hear it talked about a lot, is inattentional blindness. So the average person generally can only see about 3 degrees in front of them. You think you got this great vision, you can see 190 degrees, whatever. You really only focus on that 3 degrees right in front of you. And if you're not used to looking for motorcycles because you've never been on one, you hear a lot of times when you have these accidents, oh, I didn't see you. And you wonder as a motorcyclist, well, how could you not see me? I had my lights on, I'm coming, you heard my engine. Gross misnomer. As much as I enjoy loud pipes, they don't actually save lives. I realize I'm going to create contention by saying that, but
no, it's fine. I tend to agree as well.
Yeah, they're fun. They sound cool, but they don't do anything for safety. But it is true that these folks who have never ridden a motorcycle, they truly don't see one when they're coming up, because they're not expecting to look for it. They're expecting to see a car. And when they don't see a car, the brain doesn't process that single headlight coming at them. The other pitch that I'll throw for, you're talking about your wife went through, your son will go through one day. Motorcycling isn't for everybody. Right. I have a friend of mine from years ago, got really excited, went out, bought all the gear that's required, bought a motorcycle, and then went through the course and just did terribly. Not for lack of trying. The desire was there, but it's a certain skill set. And some people just can't make those connections for whatever reason. And so created this whole lot of churn as she had to go and try to sell her bike and everything else. And it's much better to go, I know MSF does courses, Harley Davidson runs courses, and a lot of times, especially in the States, you can rent a bike to get through the course. Yeah. So get your cheap gear, the cheapest you can get to get through the course. And then once you graduate and you're about to go buy your forever bike or your current bike, then go buy the nice brain bucket, the good jacket, all that stuff. Make sure that before you put this big investment of money into all your gear, which you absolutely should wear all the time when you're on the bike. My daughter rides with me and she wears all of her gear. And before you put your investment in all that gear, though, make sure that motorcycles are actually for you.
One of the first lessons, not to ruin the course, is they teach you risk assessment. Like that, that's like before you even start talking about motorcycles and mechanics and anything else, it's risk assessment. And that's the thing that I appreciate about MSF and motorcycle training is that's where you start, as opposed to when you and I went through driver's ed back in the day. It's a joke. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, no offense to my fellow friends that are teachers, but the way that we go about four-wheel education in this country, it needs to be taken from a different vein.
It's more of a pump, not a filter, because it's such a necessity in our society to have four wheels, and the functional mechanics to operate a car, a truck, what have you, is a completely different set of mechanics, especially with the prevalence of automatic transmissions these days. I mean, good golly, trying to buy a manual transmission car is darn near impossible unless you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for a high-end sports car. So all of that takes away layers of complexity and concentration that still applies when you're on two wheels.
And so now that we've kind of hit on a little bit of the psychology, kind of the myth and ethos of motorcycling, like I said, Danny and I take this from more of a technical perspective where, it's a skill and it's also a pleasure to do. And, hitting on some of the stuff that, learning points that you and I have done across the way. But let's kind of segue into rides that are just must do rides type of a thing. And you might want to do Highway 66, Route 66. Listening to my sweet alto sound on KMRE 102.3 FM. And if you can't get Bellingham's own low-powered and community streaming radio station on your motorcycle, you might actually have downloaded this on a podcast, playing in a Bluetooth earpiece or a speaker in your helmet, and be listening to us on KMRE.org. Now, with that said, Danny, you've been more worldwide with your motorcycle. I've only ridden in two countries, the United States and Canada. So let's start you off. What's your first ride and what's the location? So
to be fair, I also have only ridden in two countries. They're just
really
a different set of two countries. Yeah, I've not made it up to our good neighbors up north, unfortunately. But to be fair, our great country is vast enough that I've ridden in multiple regions in our country.
There you go. You still trump me on that, dude. Like you've got more locales than I do. But anyway, what's your first locale and what's the ride?
Okay, so to start out, again, coming from the Great Pacific Northwest, you're used to seeing green year round. In New England, it's not quite the case. They have this thing where the leaves change color, and it's kind of a big deal. So to get that quintessential viewing of the fall leaves changing, I got to say, taking the Mohawk Trail in Northwest Massachusetts. So this one, while it wasn't actually a ride for me, it was taking the family out in the car, absolutely worth taking on a motorcycle as well. So if you do take a look in the show notes, I will say I have a total shameless plug to my very not regularly updated YouTube channel where I recorded our trip through the Mohawk Trail so you can get a sense of it. Good blend of hills and twisties, but just the scenery, the foliage changing. Specifically going from Pittsfield to Greenfield, Mass. is that particular route. And I have a link in there as well. A couple different routes to take, but this is the one that we took. And it's neat for a couple of reasons. One, it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it is straight golden leaves the entirety of the trip once we get up there. But in our case, we started from the west end and went east. And for those who are familiar with it, there is a small company towards the tail end of this in a town called Deerfield. And I'm not sure if you've heard of this company, but this Yankee Candle company, I mean, it might have made its way around from time to time.
I heard it's a thing.
It's a thing. So they have their flagship store. So word to anybody out there who, perhaps their spouse is a fan of these scented candles. Their flagship store is like walking into a year-round Christmas show. And so you can not only start your trip by enjoying these beautiful fall leaves, but given it's beginning of the season, if you will, towards the end of the year, you can then transition to get yourself in a Christmas mood by hitting South Deerfield and checking out the Yankee Candle flagship store before you head back home. So I believe that was my tick and your talk, or are we doing it the
Yes,
other way around?
yeah, nope. I'm talk to your tick. Okay, so for me, I'm going to start here in Bellingham because, like, if you're listening to this and after listening to this double episode, and you want to get into motorcycling, like, okay, so what are, now that I've gotten trained and I'm not going to be a moron behind the handlebars, where should I go first? So I'm going to say this is post-pandemic, and let's say the border finally does open back up. I encourage anybody to go from Bellingham to the Victoria Inner Harbor. Okay, what's great about that is it hits everything that is quintessential Bellingham, Pacific Northwest, and you get to have an adventure on a budget, which is great. From Bellingham, you're going to head south, and you're not going to take I-5. That's the thing that a lot of people mess up. You're going to take the name of the game on motorcycling is take every back road you can. Okay. As long as you meet your ferry, that's the only caveat. You have to get from Bellingham to Anacortes to take the ferry up to Victoria. Now, to do so, you get to ride the one and only chuckanut. Okay. Riding chuckanut is an essential thing for any motorcyclist in this region to do. It's one of the first scenic byways. It's a beautiful ride. And when you do, you'll arrive at a ferry boat and you get to have an experience as a motorcyclist getting on a ferry, because it's not like loading up as a car. You get to go to the front of the line. It's absolutely great. Yes. When you do, you get to ride a ferry. You go up to the island, and you have to go through customs and all the other jazz as need be. And you get to ride the island to the inner harbor. Now, here's the reason why I say as a motorcyclist, this is fun. Anybody who's been to Victoria knows this. Parking sucks, okay, in the inner harbor.
Absolutely.
As a motorcyclist, that's not a problem. And it is the best way to go. And true story, on my TU250, my 250cc displacement engine, I rode from Bellingham to the inner harbor with my wife riding Queen. Yes, you can do it. Now, is it the most comfortable ride? Well, we made it work. But you do have to kit your bike up accordingly if you're going to do that longer ride, as Danny and I talked about. So definitely, that's the first trek that I would throw out there. So, tick.
All right, so I'll throw out another one here for you, but before I do, I actually have a question for you.
Hit me.
A little trivia. Where has the highest wind speed ever recorded by man been found?
I'm going to guess, I don't know, Hurricane Ridge. I don't know.
So it might surprise you to hear that is actually up here in New England, up in New Hampshire, Mount Washington. Back in 1934, they recorded a wind speed of 231 miles per hour. So for us Navy types, that would be just under 201 knots. And they still regularly get pretty stinking high winds. So this here is my second recommendation, which is to go ride Mount Washington. So you see it's rather ubiquitous up here is the bumper sticker that says, "This car climbed Mount Washington." And I went out with a friend of mine. Actually, we took our families up to New Hampshire, and he was on his Road King, and I was on my Heritage, and our families were in their respective Subarus. And we started to head up. We actually had to get turned around on the first day we tried to summit the mountain because the weather got too bad. We got about halfway up. So this is about an 8-mile trek, and it doesn't matter what the weather is down below. The weather up at the top is nasty. And in particular, at about mile 6 or 7, I forget exactly which mileage. So of the 8-mile trek, about mile 6 is about a mile of dirt road. So you were talking about laying your bike down on gravel. It's heavy packed, but you get to the top, the wind is blowing. In our case, I think we could only see about 5 feet in front of us, which coming down was pretty hair-raising, to say the least.
Yeah, totally.
You will absolutely use your brakes and be in first gear and be ready. There's turnoffs as you're going down to stop and let your brakes cool. So, but it is absolutely an experience. And if you're doing it on 2 wheels, they actually have smaller bumper stickers that says "This motorcycle climbed Mount Washington."
Radicorn.
So talk.
The next one I'm going to hit is the San Juan Islands. So from Bellingham, if you want to stay within this country, because obviously the border's not open yet, literally just take a long weekend, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and ride to the San Juan Islands. So from Bellingham, again, you're going to do the same route, hit Chuckanut, head to Anacortes, but instead of taking the Canadian run, you're going to do the San Juan Island hopper. When you go out there, what's great is that once you're on the ferry, you pay your way out there. You can hop between the islands basically for free. So that's what's nice, is you can explore for a weekend on a motorcycle. And I think I've ridden on every island that you can get a ferry to, if I recall. Maybe not the smaller. I've done Shaw. So it's a fun. It's a cool experience. If you want a rallying place to go, like your goal to go see is Mount Constitution, which is the highest mountain in the San Juans, and going up there, it's a fun ride and stuff. My wife again was behind me when we were doing this ride, so we were doing it 2 up. But what's cool about this is, again, it's an adventure, because when you don't have any really destination, you just like, okay, let's go get some great food at Duck Soup Inn on San Juan. And then, by the afternoon, you're like, I'm done with, Friday Harbor. Let's go to somewhere else, or Roche Harbor, or wherever. You can just hop around. And what's great is, as a motorcyclist in the San Juans, you ride up, you wave to the ferry master, and they will put you on the boat first. So like you don't have to worry about you're going to miss the ferry. Typically, as a motorcyclist, you get squeezed on. As long as there's room and it's safe, they can chalk you, you're going to get on, which is great. And so that makes the adventure, especially if you don't have a family yet, if you don't have little ones. Like if you want to do the solo or do it with your spouse, it's just a fun experience to do here in the Pacific Northwest. Danny, I know you got one last ride.
Yes. So as much as I have enjoyed my riding up here in New England, and goodness, I had a lot of ideas for what to throw your way for this, but I had to parse it down quite a bit. So for my last one, we are going to go overseas. So as I mentioned, I've spent a number of years in Japan. That's where I learned to ride. I went back, actually took the Harley Street 750 over there, got it legal and registered over in Japan, and rode it for quite a bit. So this is one particular ride that's a little bit shorter, but by golly, it's a blast. And this is the Mazda Hakone Turnpike. So from here, you are riding from the ocean, which there's a small bay there called Sagami-Wan, and you're riding in, and this is a route that is full of twisties, over the mountains, trees on both sides, absolutely gorgeous. And it takes you to the hot spring town of Hakone. And the real benefit of this ride, the payoff at the end, is at the very end, there's a rest stop, if you will. It was close at the time when I went there. And unfortunately, the weather was cloudy, but because it had just finished raining a little bit before I got there. But I went early morning. There was not a single other vehicle on the road. It is a toll road. I think it was between 700 or 800 yen, so about $7 to $8. But when the weather's clear, you have this crystal clear, unobstructed view of Mount Fuji. Now, I know that we did our trips when you came to visit us, and down at Lake Kawaguchi, and got some great views of the mountain there. This is just essentially the other side, a little bit further away. So you get a little bit more of a panoramic view. And I don't care how many pictures you look at of Mount Fuji, it does not compare to seeing it in person. Yeah. And just standing there and looking at that particular mountain rising up over the plains. It is absolutely stunning and breathtaking to see. So just like with the Mohawk Trail, I continue my shameless plug. There is one where I posted here for YouTube for those who are curious of what it looks like. The entire trek from Yokosuka up to the turnpike, rain and all. And but that particular video I enjoyed making, just by the sheer fact of probably the single most fun morning I had out riding out there. And that says a lot because riding in Japan was an absolute blast. So yeah, Mazda Hakone Turnpike. If you're out there or you get a chance to ride there, there are motorcycle tours you can take for tourism. absolutely worth the money and absolutely worth the time.
I loved that area when you took me out there, dude. And yeah, no, and we could do an entire show dedicated to like travel of Japan, which now that I said that, we might have to talk off the mic in the future. Okay, so for our last bit, of course, I have to change my normal shtick because Chris isn't with me. But this comes to my favorite part of every podcast, and that is our quality assurance, because these picks are picked for you by AJ Barcet and Dan Kohlbeck for your quality assurance. So, Danny, as you're the guest of the show, what's your pick for quality assurance?
So I am going to go with a particular YouTube channel that I am a huge fan of, and actually is the reason, part of why I bought the motorcycle that I did. So this is John Maxwell. By the way, if you just Google John Maxwell, you get some other guy. You got to Google John Maxwell motorcycle.
Yeah, it's just like Chris Powell Bellingham versus Chris Powell. Just saying.
Exactly. So he's a former Harley Davidson tech, as in worked for Harley Davidson. He now has his own shop, which is why if you look lately, he has not posted as many videos because, shocker, running your own business is kind of time consuming, especially when you're a brand new business. Dan from Gears and Gadgets had just went and helped him out to get a couple of videos produced this last week, which is pretty eye opening to see his workflow in a day in the life. But he is a rider on a 2018 Heritage Classic, which is the model year that they revised that particular line. But what's great with his videos is it's gear, it's safety tips, it's repairs, it's just general, hey, we're going to go out for a ride and hang out with other riders. I will say the first time you see the guy, he does have the more typical look with the scraggly
big beard. Yeah.
But he's just a genuinely good guy to watch.
I agree.
And the information there, I have learned a ton watching his videos.
No, and I know John Maxwell's channel. You don't have to be a Harley guy to appreciate what he says. I appreciated because he worked as a tech for so long. Apparently, either a 5/16 or a 5/8 wrench fixes pretty much everything on a Harley. Apparently, yeah. But I love the fact that here's the things that he sees commonly in the shop, and that's one of the things I love when I go visit the guys in the shop that I go see, either whether that's Skagit Valley or Skagit Power Sports or Mount Baker Moto here in Bellingham, or shameless shout out to the guys across the border because I do miss my international motorsports folks. But I love the fact that he points out, like we talked about, as a technical writer, if you have spokes on your wheels, you want to make sure that they're tight. You don't blow a spoke, or
but not too tight.
Not too tight, checking for your brakes, checking that, chassis bolts. I've lost a bolt off of my motorcycle. Think about that. Folks, you don't know how many bolts are on a car. On a motorcycle, you do. I got off my motorcycle once, bro, and I actually lost the keeper bolt that keeps my the little plastic cover on my little air filter. Rattled off. Yeah. And so but it's one of those things where, again, from a technical standpoint, you don't know what you don't know. And as a writer, you learn okay, this is what this is supposed to feel like. This looks different. Why is that? And, I appreciate that's kind of the tact he does. How to look for a loose spoke, what that would mean, and he doesn't do highly tech. You need to have 85 pounds of torque on the nut. No, make sure it stops,
Or half the time he goes, yeah, there's a torque spec. I can't remember it. I'll put it here later.
Put it here. Yeah.
He doesn't post. He's 35 foot-pounds or whatever. But even simple things like, hey, for those with spokes, hey, start from the valve stem. That way, when you get back to the valve stem, you didn't miss any of the spokes. Oh, wow, that makes complete sense. And I can't believe I didn't think of that to begin with.
Yeah, no. So that's what I like about John Maxwell. He no nonsense. He's the no BS watchmaker of motorcycling in my book. So for me, I've got a pick, and this was an interesting pick because I had not seen the two previous versions of this show. I knew about them, but I just didn't, I don't know, for whatever reason, I don't know. I didn't really gravitate towards them, largely because Ewan McGregor, all right, cool, you did that, you did Moulin Rouge, and you did that one role as Obi-Wan something another in that Star Force thing. So anyway, yeah, right. So no, Long Way Up, which has Ewan McGregor and his longtime best friend. They go to parts unknown. This is the third version of this. They did Long Way Round, Long Way Down, and this is their Long Way Up. What I found interesting about this one, as opposed to the other two, is that they wanted to take the tack of going from Patagonia to LA on electric EV motorcycles, which is a whole other topic for a different day. But what I found interesting about it is, Ewan maybe started off more as a fanboy of electric because he's got, off the grid type stuff for his home. But what I appreciate is they show the warts and all of the lack of infrastructure across multiple countries, range anxiety, like we talked about with gas tanks. You have that in spades on a motorcycle because, again, you have a smaller frame. So you don't have a lot of place to stow your batteries. And they also talk about like the limitations of the technology as it is today, like cold temperatures. When you're in Patagonia and it is like -5 °C, that's going to impact the actual lithium or whatever they're using for their batteries. There's things that you have to consider. It's a whole new level of technicality that I look forward to seeing progress. But what's killer, bro, is that they partnered with Harley. Yep. And again, that's why I started off the show with the hook of, we're going to bust motorcycle culture, because here's Harley, big, bad, loud pipes. One of the coolest electric concepts that I have seen in a motorcycle is the bike that they use. And they took them and enduroed them out so they could do the harsher conditions. I
was just going to say, yeah, they took the Harley Livewire, which is a very cool bike. But don't think, just like you can't take your Subaru Impreza WRX and go hit the World Rallycross. Don't think that you're going to hop on one of these live wires and do what they did in this show. They seriously kitted these things out to support the filming of this show. But I've watched a little bit of it, and it is absolutely fascinating.
And it's funny because like I came to it more as a technologist, not as a motorcycle. Oh yes, a motorcycle rider. But I was more curious of how are they going to solve for X? Because again, these bikes did not really exist short of the live wire, but like, again, Harley had to call audibles as they were doing it because they ran into software issues, hardware issues. Ewan himself had to actually work on his rig because it, spoiler, it didn't start up one day. And that's a problem. Like the thing about electric bikes is it's a computer driving it. Whereas like you and I talking about, like if, you have to, balance your carburetors, or if you're doing a fuel injection, okay, if you're not getting a spark, check your spark plug gap. Like, you can do simple mechanic stuff. And that was the interesting part about this. And I don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't seen it yet, is the troubleshooting that they had to think about in writing, the troubleshooting they had to think about as the mechanical side, and then the troubleshooting of just getting, I'm going to air quote, fuel. They also had Rivians, which were the EV trucks that were their support vehicles because they wanted to reduce their carbon footprint, blah, blah, blah. But again, from the notion of if this is the future, they also show the warts of like, this is the problems that we have with the technology as it is. And I appreciated that. Yes, they probably did a lot of grooming and a lot of cutting, but anybody who watches this, if you're a motorcycle enthusiast or not, if you're just into technology, it's a cool technology show to even check out.
I got to throw one little curveball to you because it's not in the show notes here, but
sure.
Since you talked about range anxiety, I would not be a good sailor if I didn't have a sea story. Years and years ago, talking about range anxiety, kind of coupled with that, gas deteriorates, especially when it's sitting, on the seawall for a while. So that first bike I told you, a 94 CB400. Bumblebee. I took it out for a ride shortly after coming back from I think a 2 or 3 week underway. And I'm out on the Yokohama Bay Bridge. Okay. So this is a pretty massive bridge that spans from Yokohama to Kawasaki en route to Tokyo. My bike died mid-span. I cannot tell you how utterly terrifying it is to be stuck on a major freeway hundreds of feet above the bay with a bike that won't start. Now, thankfully, in my case, I was able to coax it alive just long enough to get to the mid-span parking area, the Daikoku Futo parking area. But yeah, just like with laying your bike down, it's not a matter of if, it's when. There will be a point that's in your riding career where you're going to have that bike die on you. Now, you might get lucky, like with that CB400. There was either somebody could come pick me up, or in other cases, there's a reserve tank, which you tend not to see these days, which is a gross miscarriage of justice, in my opinion. But it'll happen at some point where you're riding along and you're not paying attention to that idiot light popping on. And next thing you know, you're stranded, buddy. So anyway, that was my quick sea story. I had to throw that in there because now that you mentioned it a couple times, I'd be remiss if I didn't share it.
No, I appreciate it because, like I said, it's one of those things where, again, we get used to things. Like my motorcycle does not have a fuel gauge. It just has the idiot light, and anybody will tell you idiot lights just prove one thing: the light will turn on. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work.
Right.
So you keep track of things like how much did you fill up? Did you fill up all the way? How much is it in your tanks? You swish it back and forth. Like these are things, again, we take for granted behind four wheels. We get complacent. You know, texting while driving is not a thing in the motorcycle culture. Like, no. You know, like, and that's the interesting thing. So anyway, Danny, thank you so much for coming up on the show finally. Well, that wraps up this 189th edition of the Bellingham podcast. Thank you again so much for listening to us, rating us, reviewing us, wherever you like to get your podcast. Remember, if you are in the Bellingham area, you might be listening to us on Camarie 102.3 FM. And if you are interested in any of these cool, way mega skookum rides that Danny has talked about, one, we have a ton of links in the show notes, but the other thing, check him out on YouTube. There'll be a link there. You can see all of his GoPro footage that he's done, and he's got a pretty good eye for editing. From the city by the Salish Sea, I'm AJ Barsay.
And I'm Dan Kohlbeck. Sorry.
It's okay.
No, this has been a blast there, bro. I do appreciate the opportunity to get on. This has been fun. I always love talking about motorcycles, so any chance I get to, I'm going to take it.
Awesome. I appreciate it.